Chapter 96. In the past, she once believed that she was the strongest person. Fundamentally, vampires were a race with absolute authority when it came to battle capability and magic. And even amongst them, she was leagues above the rest right from the very beginning. The latent amount of mana was different. The amount of mana they had from the moment they were born was completely different. Basic attributes and the cap on the limitations. The one who was born well above the others in both of these aspects was her, Bennett Nash. Everyone around her had labeled her as a child prodigy or a princess. However, those labels only caused her to feel discomfort. Looking at the vampires around her, she had never considered them to be part of the same species as her. She could only see them as low-leveled lesser life forms. She could not think of them as the same race as her either. Was her self-esteem just simply so high that it resulted in her feeling that way? Or was it just common for a child to think that they were special and different from others? If that was the case, then all was well. Truly, if that was all there was to it, it would have all been fine. However, in actual fact, she really was different from the others. The more that she grew up, the wider the gap between her and the others became. Eventually, this caused her to feel that everything else in the world was nothing but rubbish. It's as if they're things that look like me, but are actually completely different living beings. Such a thought was ever present in the mind of Bennett Nash, almost to the point of making her feel certain that was how it actually was. Genius? Prodigy? Exceptionally talented? Even when she was described or categorized in any and every form of that description, none of them felt right. If an individual human and an individual monkey were to ever face off against each other in terms of their speed in solving equations and the human won, was that guy a prodigy? No, of course not. It was just natural that a human would win against a monkey. In summary, it was exactly just that. It was just the most natural course of events that Bennett Nash was able to defeat all other vampires in existence. It was just simply because they were all inferior to Bennett Nash and were existences lower ranked than herself. The gaps arose just simply because they were lesser living creatures. At the very least, Bennett Nash recognized the sheer difference between herself and the others in such a way. There was once even a time she had gone all around the continent just to look for an enemy who would be able to fight with her on equal footing. The more that she fought and killed, the more her power grew. Eventually, she reached a point that there was nobody who would go against her. How boring it was for her to be victorious in a battle that she knew for certain she would win even before anything had started. The feeling of how dull everything was. The feeling of how disappointing and unsatisfying everything was. There had been times when she felt that the enemy had put up a good fight. There had even been times when she felt there was some difficulty. However, she had never once met an enemy whom she believed could defeat her. She had also never met anyone that could truly be called an enemy who could fight her as her equal. Eventually, she exterminated all enemies on her continent, which was equal to a quarter of the land ma.s.ses of the world, requiring her to venture out into the world as her next destination. She had previously heard rumors of the existence of the Demon King and the Lion King, who were categorized as her fellow supreme rulers. In truth, she did not have the slightest bit of expectation for them, as she believed that she would still come out victorious. Nevertheless, they were still enemies that she had to eventually meet face to face. They had to determine who was the strongest, and the one who could come out victorious in the end would be the individual who could decide the future of the world. In the past, before Rapazmafal stood on top of the world only barely managed to maintain the balance because the top four individuals were at a stalemate: the pinnacle of the demon race, the Demon King; the pinnacle of the magical beasts, the Lion King; the pinnacle of the Dragon King, the Dragon King; and the pinnacle of the vampire race, the Vampire Princess. These four were individuals who had to eventually face each other to determine supremacy. Apparently, there was also someone called the Devil King Agacaros in Hell. However, because he did not feel like coming out to the surface, the ones competing to be the true supreme ruler were long considered to be just the four of them. As such, when she heard that news, she was surprised for a moment. The Dragon King had been subjugated by a Flugel woman. One of the four pillars who maintained the world's balance and were deemed the strongest was butchered by a member of a Flugel race who was completely under the radar. Even Bennett Nash had heard about the rumors of the Dragon King. His personality was the very definition of arrogance. He was a tyrant who considered every existence other than himself to be a lesser being and often killed other living creatures on a whim. She had heard that he often scared the humanoids and demanded live sacrifices. As such, it was not that surprising that the humanoids bore a grudge against him. Even if he was subjugated, it would just simply be a fitting retribution. The problem was how it was the act of a single individual. The individual had not been leading an army, there were no traps involved, nor did the individual lead them to their demise through skillful and deceitful words. The individual boldly walked up to him, attacked him, and single-handedly slaughtered him. This very fact caused Bennett Nash to feel a sense of surprise. Nevertheless, at the very moment, she was still not fascinated enough. The reason the Dragon King lost was that he was weak. In other words, he was just someone insignificant and not as powerful as he was described by all the rumors. After Bennett Nash made such a conclusion, she quickly lost interest in the Flugel woman. However, she only realized her mistake just a few years after all of that. And this realization came with herself as the price. As a result of when that very specific Flugel, Ruppes Moffel, came storming into her very own domain. It was the very first time in her life that she fought whilst she was mentally prepared to be defeated. It was also the first time in her life she felt such excitement during the battle. It was the very first time since she had been born a few hundred years ago that she fought with someone on her equal, no, the first time she met someone who was superior to her. The races involved were a vampire and a Flugel. Within the humanoid races, they symbolized darkness and light respectively and were the two races where the relations H.I+P could be seen as the furthest possible from each other. However, she understood. She's the same as me. Other mobs, other vampires, she's far closer to me than any of those. She was a nonconformer within the boundaries of her own race just like herself, a faulty existence given birth to by the world and an existence which should not have existed. For the first time, she could not see victory in sight. She never thought until this very moment that she would one day be able to lose herself in a battle where her defeat was in sight. She was not in a battle where victory was certain and was winning in the way it was predicted. She was full-heartedly challenging in a battle where she did not know whether she would be able to win or lose. This, how pleasant. In the end, it was painfully clear defeat on Bennett Nash's behalf, resulting in Bennett Nash agreeing to join forces with that woman with the qualification that it would only be to the point where Ruppes managed to unify the world. It was humiliating to her that she was not dealt a finest H.I+N.G blow. However, it was more humiliating to her when that woman was mindful of her and made everything as let's consider it as you didn't lose. Yet, at the same time, it was the S.H.I+P that Bennett Nash had to board. Because she met that woman, she found out that there were superior existences. She became aware for the first time how fun battles were. Furthermore, she was able to find out that she could improve further. Then it would be the next time. Next time for sure, she would win against that woman. Even if she were to lose at that time, she would not receive any pity. The pity that she received due to this loss was her fault because she was weak enough that her enemy could afford to pity her. To ignore that very fact and make light of her own loss, Bennett Nash's own pride would not allow such a thing. Therefore, for now, she decided to obey that woman to help her become the supreme ruler. When that woman took command of the world, it would be time for the rematch. For the sake of that, she did not mind providing her assistance. When that woman stood on top of the world, they would have a true conclusive battle. That was most likely the first ever wish from the bottom of her heart that Bennett Nash had. Notwithstanding that it was often misunderstood, Bennett Nash did not particularly hate Ruppes. Although she had felt some dissatisfaction about getting a dent on her T.I.Tle of the strongest, she recognized that she was not strong enough. As such, she neither hated nor resented Ruppes. If anything, she was thankful to Ruppes and respected her for it. If Bennett Nash was asked to name one person that she respected out of the entire world, she would no doubt mention Ruppes's name without the slightest bit of hesitation. Bennett Nash did not hate Ruppes at all. If anything, she liked Ruppes. Her affection was strong and pas.cyanate, similar to a young maiden who had just fallen in love for the first time. She yearned for Rupaz in her every waking moment. It was a feeling similar to affection, a feeling not far from love. The only difference was, in her case, all of those feelings were turned into a murderous intent and pushed onto her fangs. Every form of affectionate expression was turned into a murderous expression, thus resulting in them coming out as fatal attacks. Therefore, Rupaz Mafal alone was someone that only she could kill. She would not permit anyone else to kill Rupaz, and only Rupaz would be permitted to kill her. As a consequence, she simply could not accept the outcome of that incident. She could never forgive the bunch of people who had defiled the battle between Rupaz and herself. Everything began when Bennett Nash asked Rupaz for a rematch. It was a mutual agreement between the two of them. The pact stated that when Rupaz unified the world, she would once again fight Bennett Nash with all of her might this time. Rupaz had indeed fulfilled that agreement, and the two of them were clas.h.i+ng with each other, using powers which could end up destroying the whole world as collateral. One was the supreme ruler who had gained extraordinary strength by utilizing her own power to create golden apples and the stat-increasing items she created through alchemy. And the other was Bennett Nash, who had endlessly absorbed mana to get herself to level 1000 through her own efforts after gaining a rival called Rupaz and realizing her own potential. Both were existences which had far said the boundaries of the vampire and the flugel races respectively, and each were dis.h.i+ng out skills and power which was anything beyond common sense at each other. For Bennett Nash, it was the moment of exhilaration that she had long awaited, believing that the battle would continue until she ended up dead or she killed her opponent. Eventually, the battle entered its climax, and Bennett Nash was finally being pushed back into the corner. She was truly riddled with wounds all over her body. Not even her innate vampire regeneration ability could keep up, and she was likely to use up all of her remaining strength after the next full-powered attack. In comparison, Rupaz still had some leeway. With the current state of things, one could only admit that Rupaz had an overwhelming advantage in this situation. Of course, Bennett Nash was not someone who would give up just because of that. If she only had enough strength to attack one last time, she just had to reverse the situation with that one attack. It was as simple as that. "I'm coming, Mafal, let's end it with this last attack." "Yeah, sounds like a plan. Come at me to your heart's content, Bennett." The figure of Rupaz, who moved her hands with an expression as if she was holding back, felt annoyingly charming as usual. "Even if I'm going to lose, I want to land one hit. I'm going to put everything I have into this attack and slam it into her. I'll become an existence she will never forget. No. I'm going to win. I'm going to pierce her heart with this one attack." With the drive to strive for a certain victory, Bennett Nash started DOS.H.I+ng towards Rupaz, and Rupaz welcomed that attack head-on. Nevertheless, the betrayal happened all too suddenly. Right before the attack landed, someone had used interference arcane magic on Rupaz. This interference skill activated and caused Rupaz to become unable to move for a moment. Bennett Nash noticed this interference and quickly tried to stop her attack at the last moment. However, an attack which already contained the momentum imbued by all of her might could not be easily stopped. Although her claws managed to avoid dealing a fatal blow, it still landed on Rupaz's flank, causing a red flower to blossom. "You lot, what is the meaning of this?" Of course, the one who shouted this out loud was Bennett Nash. From her point of view, her anger was reasonable as her long-awaited battle was interrupted by something boorish. Therefore, she was staring daggers with detestation towards the individuals, the 7 heroes, who had interrupted everything. However, she quickly noticed it. There was something strange about them. They were overflowing with an unbelievable amount of divine energy they normally would not have. They currently had enough power that even when compared to her current self, they would not be considered inferior. What's this? I admit the 7 heroes are strong individuals, but they're definitely not this strong. Against Bennett Nash, who was seething with rage, the 7 heroes did not answer back with anything. Let alone that, they used arcane magic to restrain Bennett Nash and sealed her movement. Normally, she would not have been affected by such arcane magic, and even if she was, she would quickly be able to break out of it. However, the current Bennett Nash was wounded all throughout her body. She could barely move her limbs satisfactorily. In the end, Bennett Nash could only slump on the ground pitifully and observe the situation while being unable to figure out what was happening. Apologies, Bennett. Looks like there's something important I have to attend to. I'm sorry, but let's consider this time's battle as just wounding each other and leave the conclusion for next time. Wait, Muffle. Don't worry, I will definitely come back. You should sharpen your fangs until that point. After saying that, she left Bennett Nash where she was and flew away, and did not end up returning. What happened afterwards was as foretold by history. The wound that Bennett Nash landed on Ruppaz served as the main cause that Ruppaz was cornered and eventually defeated by the 7 heroes. Bennett Nash was again subjected to a defeat phrased as wounding each other. Furthermore, the loss of her rival robbed her of a reason to continue striving and living. She lost all interest in worldly matters and started to view the entire world with indifference, making her hole up in her own coffin. Although she knew very well after receiving a message from her subordinates that Alioth and the others were about to fight against the Demon King and that they were requesting her reinforcements. Notwithstanding all that, she ignored everyone and kicked the messenger away. She knew that their betrayal was not out of their own true wills. Nevertheless, she could not forgive them. Therefore, she did not pay any heed whatsoever to what was happening around the world. It did not matter to her that the humanoids were pushed into a corner. It also did not matter to her however many of the heroes died. Nothing managed to move her heart. The turning point for all of these came upon her that fateful day, approximately 50 years after the defeat of Ruppaz. It was the day that the army full of demon fodders came to invade her country. The day where she crushed them all as a slight exercise. It was because of the bombshare.e.l.l dropped by the only individual within that H.O.A.rd that put up some of a fight, the Demon King. As expected of the vampire princess. You're worthy of being rumored to be the only person within even the 7 heroes that could fight against that Ruppaz Muffle alone. On the other hand, you don't reach up to the rumors of yourself. Well, I'll admit that you're quite strong, but that's all there is to it. The fight between the two of them was not on equal footing. Although the Demon King still had some leeway, there were many wounds all over his body, and furthermore, much of his clothes were torn. In contrast, Bennett Nash was almost completely untouched. The flow of the battle was overwhelmingly in her favor. Nevertheless, it could faintly be felt that the Demon King had also not used all of his power to fight. What was fascinating was how even though he was being overwhelmed to this degree, the Demon King still did not show the slightest intention of fighting properly. It's a shame. If you were there at the time, maybe the state of the world would be different right now. Whatever. I really couldn't care less what those guys did. How bitter. Is that all arising out of the anger of being interrupted in a battle against her? You should choose your words more carefully. I don't mind tearing apart that mouth of yours that's moving around a lot. Spot on, huh? Bennett Nash moved with a speed fast enough to leave sound behind. Blood blossomed out like a flower as the Demon King, who had his right arm along with his shoulder sliced off, took some distance. However, his face was still as fearless as ever, and notwithstanding that his arm was cut off, he did not even react a little. Well, just calm down a little. Alcor? Alcor is how we refer to Ruppaz amongst us, you see. Anyways, didn't she say it herself? That she'll definitely return? You're jumping to conclusions too rashly. You talk as if you know something. That's because I do. During the time the Demon King replied, he brought the severed arm towards the open wound. When he did, the arm reattached itself perfectly, even though he had not sti.tched it up. After he tested that his fingers moved as normal, he looked at Bennett Nash with the smile of a devil offering temptation to its target. Ruppaz Muffle will definitely return. Let's see, according to her, it'll be about 150 years from now. To a vampire like you, it shouldn't be that long of a duration to wait. It will be good if you just wait around patiently. Don't worry, your wish will definitely be fulfilled. Even now, Bennett Nash did not know why the Demon King knew of such a thing. She also did not know who he was referring to when he mentioned her. Nevertheless, it became a fact with Rapaz's actual return. Then, it's fine. The reality was everything. Everything else was irrelevant, nor was she interested in anything else. As long as this version of reality existed, she was fine with it. She did not require anything else. Bennett Nash silently and patiently awaited her arch-rival's presence to approach her as she waited in a room where her subordinates were forbidden from entering. Chapter 97 The Kingdom of the Vampires, Mjolnir. The capital was established on the premise that it would be nighttime at all times. Surrounding the domain of the kingdom was constant darkness given birth to by Bennett Nash's arcane magic, which did not permit the light of day to ever enter. As a consequence, there was no concept of morning, afternoon, or evening in this kingdom. The entire area surrounding the kingdom was constantly in a state of midnight. In these circuit mistances, there were streetlights prepared throughout the kingdom, faintly providing artificial light. For the other humanoids, it might be considered dark. However, for the vampires, it was just the right amount of lighting. The structures within the kingdom were precisely those belonging to medieval Europe. Nevertheless, as one could have expected, it was nothing like normal cities. No matter what building or castle one looked at, it was built luxuriously. There was not a single building that looked ordinary or in a deplorable state. Vampires were the aristocrats of the night. Every citizen within this kingdom was a.n.o.bly and affluent, that's what Dina had told me. Of course, it was not as if there was no one who did manual labor. All over the kingdom, there were those that were working and opening the stores. However, those activities were not done by the vampires but by a species of undead categorized as ghouls. Apparently, they were human corpses that were mutated by mana and reanimated, a bunch of pitiful existences which could not even leave any offspring behind. In other words, although they could always only last for a single generation, as long as there were corpses and mana, they could be born without any restriction. Therefore, although they could not prosper, they could not be exterminated either. Well, they're pretty much what you call zombies. As there were only good-looking ones within the capital, it was fortunate that one would not feel any disgust when looking at them. If one were to ignore the fact that they looked blue, they looked exactly like normal humans. Furthermore, one could even converse with them. The ghouls, who had nowhere to go, were permitted to live within Mjolnir and somehow said their days by living in conditions almost no different from that of slaves. Notwithstanding that I felt a little pity for them, I supposed having a place to live was better than nothing. There was no way that they would be able to enter the boundaries of the other countries. If they were also denied entry into this country, their only fate would be to be subjugated as moving corpses. Those ghouls who were heavily deformed were not even permitted to enter this country. Life was definitely hard for the ghouls. This was what I wanted to say: a grave should not be made in a location dense with mana. Therefore, the graves in this world were ordinarily built behind monasteries and were enveloped by mana-repellent barriers cast by acolytes. If such a thing were not done, there would be an outbreak of zombies. Notwithstanding all of that, zombies still arose. One of the causes could be attributed to those individuals who were scared of dying. They might intentionally go to a location where mana was dense so that they could be reanimated as zombies. It was not as if I could not understand why they did it, but I questioned their will to continue living even if they were to become zombies. I'll have one clt.I.te. One here you go. Anyways, just because they were zombies did not mean they were an existence that one had to be scared of. Just as there were humans with good and bad intentions, in this world, the zombies retained the personalities of their previous lives. Therefore, the good individuals remained good and bad individuals remained bad even after they turned into zombies. Nevertheless, as one would have expected, the humanoids would consider the ghouls as nothing more than magical beasts and felt it was perfectly reasonable to turn them into ash without a second thought. When I ordered from a blue-faced middle-aged man working as a street vendor, he handed me a snack that looked like a crepe with his hands which were enveloped by a clean pair of gloves. After paying for the snack and biting into it, a jam that tasted like it was made from something similar to a strawberry overflowed into my mouth. It did not seem like they would be handing me something rotten just because they were zombies. If I were to put things into a perspective that was easier to understand, there existed a distinction within the kingdom where the vampires were the upper class and the zombies were the manual laborers. And the roads were slightly unique. Because I flew in, I was able to see it, but this kingdom was shaped in a strange way if one were to look from above. The kingdom was perfectly circular and surrounded by walls. And within the walls, the large roadways largely divided the kingdom into what looked to be a heptagram. I felt like taking my time to go around the area as a tourist, but unfortunately, the reason for my visit this time was not to be a tourist. The reason I was here was none other than to accept the invitation from Bennett Nash. Truthfully, I wanted to handle Leon and Tyrfing first. However, if I were to leave her alone, I did not know what she was going to start doing. In the worst-case scenario, there was even the possibility of getting pincered by Leon and Bennett Nash. Therefore, I left Dina and the 12 stars in charge of Leon and came to this location alone. Now that I thought about it, ever since I had arrived in this world, excluding the moment right after the summoning, this was the first time I was completely alone. Well, if it's just a little, it should be fine. I'll just go around lightheartedly. Oi, you. Since I'm actually at the Vampire's Kingdom, I suppose I'll take this occasion to have a quick tour. As I was thinking that, someone talked to me from behind. When I turned to look, there was someone with the appearance of a country's princess, who had her arms crossed and was looking at me with displeasure. I've been thinking about it since before, but you have quite light footwork, don't you? Oi. All things considered, is it even fine for someone like you to be casually coming out to the middle of the town like this? You're still one of the 7 heroes, after all. Oh. Hey, Bennett. Don't you hey, Bennett me. When I was wondering what you were doing for you to not turn up at the castle even when I sensed your presence arriving at the kingdom, even though I was waiting, you're pretty bold to be touring around the place whilst ignoring me. Haha, no need to rush things too much. I was planning to properly head to your place afterwards. Although this was an irrelevant fact for the moment, whenever I said Bennett Nash, it was always automatically changed to a more intimate nickname, Bennett. In all likelihood, it was because the real Ruppas had always referred to her that way. Additionally, for some reason, I did not feel any sense of unease towards her. Although I understood that she was a dangerous individual, strangely, I felt a greater feeling of goodwill towards her. Of course, it was something different from a feeling of sexual affection. But how should I phrase this? For example, a friend who's in an equal position? It felt as if I was speaking to someone like that. I could not help but feel a sense of closeness towards her. Surprisingly, the individual who was most acknowledged by the real Ruppas was likely to be this Bennett Nash. By the way, do you have any places you'd recommend visiting within the capital? Oh yeah, I'm also looking for souvenirs but I haven't been able to find them. Did your personality get somewhat softer? I've been asked that a lot. It was a rare occasion where I finally got to meet the last of the 7 heroes. From the way that she spoke, I was able to figure out that she was not in the same condition as I was, however, I expected this from the beginning. Nevertheless, it was just too dull to start a death match right after the reunion. It was not strange for me to want to have a chat with her and get to know what kind of an individual she was. I ordered another CLT.I.Te from the store and shoved it into the complaining Bennett Nash's mouth. In any event, instead of talking here, Mugyo. Don't say something so stiff. It's a special occasion. It'll be boring to just start killing and get things over so quickly right after the reunion. Here, come and show me the key highlights of this kingdom. Personality-wise, the other 7 heroes were friendlier and warmer. There was no mistake in that. Nevertheless, although it was strange, I felt that she was the easiest to get along with. After all, she did not have that sense of strange psyche towards me. She was neither like the 12 stars who felt excessive admiration towards me nor was she like the 7 heroes who were psychologically oppressed from their guilt. She was neither fearful of me nor was she like Dina where I could not tell what she was thinking. It would be easier to say she was just natural. She was standing in the same position that I was. And the current me could not help but feel a sense of ease and comfort. Though, there's also something wrong with me, considering that I'm feeling this way even when she's constantly releasing insatiable blood.u.s.t towards me. Asterisk after being ushered by Bennett Nash, the location that I came upon was something like a coliseum. She had probably wanted to fight with me as soon as possible. However, when I said, "I guess I'll go home now," she quickly took on the role of showing me around the kingdom. She was so easy to understand and handle. In all honesty, I would have loved to drag this on, create a loose atmosphere, and avoid the battle itself. After all, based on what I have heard so far, if Bennett Nash was defeated, the humanoids would suffer significantly detrimental effects that would likely lead to them falling into a horrible condition. It was because Bennett Nash existed that the demon race was unable to advance further. If I were to word it differently, it would mean that if she was defeated, that would become possible. As such, as a personal preference, I would have wanted to delay the battle with her until later. TLN, if you are sensitive to animal violence, you might want to consider skipping the rest of the chapter, though it's actually not very graphic. This place is an arena for magical beasts. We make captured magical beasts fight each other to the death and gamble on who will win. It's the most popular pastime in the capital. You have quite a B.L.O.O.D.Y pastime. Lately, there's quite a lot of magical beasts trying to invade us from Tyrfing, so we're not really lacking in predict.I.P.ants. It also serves as an execution for the magical beasts, you see. Although she just said something outrageous as if it was the most ordinary thing in the world, if one were to consider this world's level of civilization, it was not very strange overall. Even back on Earth, the executions in the Middle Ages served as a form of entertainment for the other citizens. After all, there were even records stating that in France and England, a large number of people turned up to watch public executions. Additionally, this place was the kingdom of the vampires who were known to be belligerent. Furthermore, the ones who were being executed were the enemy country's magical beasts. So it was no wonder any feelings of pity or morals were not part of the equation. The only people who would say such a thing as "why you are doing such a horrible thing," would be individuals who had lived in a peaceful country and had time to learn such things as morals. The problem was, even as an individual who had grown up in J.A.Pan, had become blinded by peace, and had time to learn such morals, I did not feel very repulsed by what was happening. It was not as if I did not feel like pitying them. Yeah, I even thought that they were doing something quite horrible. But above all of that, I understood and accepted that, well yeah, it's just that kind of a country. I've reached quite a dangerous place already. Since we're already here, do you want to make a bet? Sure. After being asked as such by Bennett Nash, I looked at the arena. Although it was called an arena, because it was entirely surrounded by walls and escape was absolutely impossible, it would be better to call it a prison. The vampires were looking down from a safe height and were having a good time as they were shouting things out. And the ones in the arena looked like a hippo-like animal with a strong-looking body and a weasel-like animal with a small stature. In terms of size, the hippo was towering over 5 meters whereas the weasel was at most 1 meter. Just applying common sense, one would not think that the weasel stood any chance at winning. The odds were clearly in favor of the hippo, and in actual fact, even when I looked at the status of each, the hippo was in the lead. With all that considered, this was nothing but one side bullying the other. Then I'll bet 50 euro towards the hippo. That's quite a cheap way to bet. As expected of the monarch of the kingdom. The perception of the value of money was completely different. In terms of J.A.Pain's yen, 50 euro was equivalent to approximately 10,000 yen too, therefore I had bet quite a significant amount. Nevertheless, for her, the amount must have been like pocket change. She was looking at me with an exasperated expression. Subsequently, when the death match began, as expected, the hippo was winning by an overwhelming margin. Of course, it was. After all, the physiques of the two were completely different. As one could see from how boxing CLA.S.SES were finely divided every few kilograms, weight could sometimes be directly equated with strength. In this world, such a thing could mostly be ignored due to individual stats. However, even when it came to their statuses, the hippo was in the lead as well. As a consequence, the match was almost as good as set before it even began. The hippo's body slammed into the weasel quite strongly and the small weasel's body danced midair. Its arms and feet were broken and bent into weird shapes. It was obvious that the weasel was pushed to the brink of death after just a single hit. Nevertheless, the weasel tried to reposture itself as it was falling down and gnawed into the hippo's neck. Maybe it was the weasel's last fart. Well, it wasn't farting though. As I was thinking about such a thing, I noticed that something was strange. The weasel's teeth were dug into the hippo and did not let go. The hippo was screaming and struggling about in agony. Eventually, the hippo gave into the pain and lost consciousness, suffering the fate of having its body greedily devoured by the weasel. The smaller one just ended up winning. Oi! Phew, looks like you predicted it wrong. Havrines might be small, but they're completely fearless. They're dangerous predators that bite at the prey until its last breath. In this arena, there's a tradition of being able to make a giant killing from them. Havrines. They're a new species of magical beasts that started coming into existence after you were sealed up. They were originally a smaller wolverine that mutated into a magical beast. When I looked around, I saw that a bunch of vampires were fuming and saying, "Another one got done in by him again." I see, it seemed those guys also predicted it wrong like I did. As I was thinking I got played, I paid out the 50 euro bet reluctantly. If it were to be known later that I lost it due to a bet, Libra is going to scold me. Chapter 98. I was shown around different places by Bennett Nash, but I was regretting things a little. It looked like I really should not have left everything up to her discretion. As I was thinking I could avoid fighting with her in the end by continuing this lax atmosphere, reality showed me that things were not that sweet. The place that Bennett Nash took me to was a large building near the castle which was empty inside. From the outside, the building looked fancy, but inside, there were only strong and reinforced-looking walls, a ceiling, and a floor with nothing else inside. There were not even the bare minimal amenities required for day-to-day life, making was clear that the S.P.A.CE was not designed for habitation. This thing's a building specially built in preparation for the day that would eventually come to PAS.S. Because it's built using Mizar steel that was specially imported from Blutgong, the building won't even crack a little in most situations. Even then, it should still be quite fragile compared to you and me. But at least it'll serve as a location for us to be able to fight without having to worry about the environment. However I think about it, this is not a tourist location, is it? I wouldn't have minded showing you around a bit more, but yeah, sorry, but I'm not used to restraining myself, you see. When the carrot is hanging right in front of me, I'm not able to hold myself back. Seems like I'm even worse than horses. She was smiling as she said that. However, as opposed to her smile, she was very clearly emanating the intention to fight. In all likelihood, if a low-leveled person were to walk into the building, that person would not even be able to remain standing due to the intimidating aura emitted by her. She's not even a flugel. She's giving off that intimidating aura as if it's the most natural thing in the world. What is even going on with her? As she was clearly in a different league compared to all of my enemies in the past, this time alone, I would not be able to say that it would be an easy fight. It looked like I had to fully prepare myself. I've waited too long for this moment. Just for this moment, I've waited way too long. Bennett Nash's facial expression distorted in antic.I.P.ation of battle. Her beautiful countenance changed into a sharp evil expression and the ends of her mouth lifted to reveal her fangs. Her eyes shone a crimson-red color and her silver hair waved about violently. Matching that, I sharpened my consciousness, which caused everything in the environment to slow down. Even then, the feeling of the aura emitted by her did not change. This indicated that the stretch of time she was experiencing was on par with mine. Now, let's begin. At the same time as she said that, she charged in. Just by taking a step, the floor which was under her feet shattered and exploded, resulting in the debris stopping mid-air. To clarify, it was not as if the debris actually stopped in the air. From a third party's point of view, it would have seemed like Bennett Nash had disappeared and the floor underneath her exploded. And even before a single second had said, all the debris would have fallen back down on the ground. However, it was different for me. I was experiencing a perception of S.P.A.C.E and time where time itself was dilated to the extreme limit, such that the debris which was a part of the explosion effectively stopped midair without falling back down, essentially isolating me as I left the world's concept of time behind. I existed in a time and S.P.A.C.E which were no different from the state of stopped time. In this situation, only Bennett Nash was able to move about nimbly, as she closed in on me. It's the same with the Demon King, but to think that they're able to so naturally keep up within the time, world, between time. One, it seemed there was no falsehood in her being T.I. the strongest of the 7 heroes. Needless to say, I was not joyful of this turnout. Tisk. In response to Bennett Nash's claw attack, I grabbed her wrist to stop her and countered by kicking her feet away. The instant I thought that I had thrown Bennett Nash off balance, she kicked behind her, which caused me to quickly release her wrist as I flew backwards. In the S.P.A.C.E between me and Bennett Nash, a cannon-like shockwave billowed through vertically, opening a Ma.S.Civ hole in the ceiling. I wonder what happened to that. The building won't even crack a little in most situations thing. Also, this was an extremely irrelevant thing, but because she had raised her feet around in front of me, I saw something I should not have even if I did not try to. White, huh? A little unexpected. Anyways, wouldn't it be better if the skirt was a little longer? As I was thinking about such a stupid thing, Bennett Nash's kick changed from a drop kick to an axe kick. Distance-wise, there was no way that it would hit me. However, there was no way that her attack was performed to merely make a whiff in the air. I took half a step to the side just in case, and as expected, a black/PAS said through the spot that I had just stepped away from. Magic. Not to mention a high-powered one without using an incantation from her leg. However, I was not given any time to be surprised as Bennett Nash had already moved on to her next attack. Something black shone and condensed within her hand. Subsequently, what could be described as a torrent of darkness was released from her hand as an embodiment of destruction. A thick laser? A destruction ray? It was a little troublesome to properly describe it in words, but it was effectively a large beam of light you often saw in mangas. As a result of me dodging the ray that traveled straight forward, it pierced through the building's wall and flew away somewhere. Ah, it's no good. This building's not able to withstand Bennett Nash's power whatsoever. Anyways, to be on the defensive the whole time is kind of, you know? I guess this time, I'll try attacking her. I kicked the ground and closed the distance between us, then chopped at her with my hand. In retaliation, Bennett Nash blocked the attack and thrust her finger to counter me. I sidestepped very quickly, however, Bennett Nash's finger still scratched past my cheek, yet at the same time, I matched the timing of her counter by countering with a knee kick. Nevertheless, Bennett Nash was able to stop that with her own knee, finally managing to land a swift punch onto my cheek. Notwithstanding that, I was able to avoid taking any damage by spinning my whole body and head, making her punch slip. Taking advantage of the centrifugal force, I tried to land the back of my hand on her. However, Bennett Nash lowered herself and swiped at my feet by kicking close to the ground. Although I almost fell down, I placed my hands on the ground and pushed myself back up through the sheer physical strength in my arms. I kicked upwards towards her using the force I gained from the handstand and launched her upwards by connecting with her chin. However, she spun in midair and closed back in on me, and in return, I decided to receive her head-on. Both of our arms and legs moved about rapidly, and after layers upon layers of feints, our fists collided in the middle. After being pushed back a little by the rebound, I switched into my next move. Psycho-compression. For now, let's start with debuffing the enemy. This was just the fundamental basics. I applied telekinesis on Bennett Nash and inhibited her movements, then tried to close in on her. However, faster than I could get close to her, she forcibly shattered the telekinesis spell into thousands of pieces and countered back by using her claws. What the? How come you can't be restrained at all? Although Ruppaz thought as such, it was evident that Bennett Nash was delayed even if it was for a fraction of an instant. As a consequence, her claws swung at empty air, again having the effect of doing nothing but destroying the walls and the floor. On the other hand, after I leapt into the air to avoid her attack, I moved around to land behind her. She turned around in a hurry, but it was just a bit too late. My crescent kick landed on her and sent her slender body flying. If she was one of the 7 luminaries, it would have been certain death. Even if she was one of the 12 heavenly stars, she would definitely have taken significant damage from that attack. Notwithstanding that, Bennett Nash halted the momentum midair and landed back down on the ground as if nothing had happened at all. She did not show any indication of charging in at all. It seemed she was just testing the waters. As our perception of time returned back to normal, the initial debris which was created as a result of Bennett Nash kicking the floor at the beginning of the battle fell to the ground. I guess I should say it's to be expected. I thought I managed to quickly guard against that attack, but seems my arm was fractured. Whilst looking at her arm which was bent in a strange direction, Bennett Nash smiled joyfully. In a battle for supremacy against an equal rival, to have one of your arms shattered was by no means an insignificant event. It was momentous damage which could end up deciding the fate of the battle right away. However, Bennett Nash forcibly moved her arm back into its original position and started moving her fingers as if nothing had happened. The vampire race's regenerative ability? No, even if it was far too quick. Looks like she's got some HP recovery equipment or something. But it's definitely good news that her arms broke from just that. However fast her regeneration is, her durability's definitely not that high. It's probably fine to think that I'm stronger than her when it comes to power and endurance. But considering that was definitely a soft attack. I'm not too pleased with you holding back, you know. Bennett Nash scowled at me as she said that with dissatisfaction. Holding back, huh? Well sure, that attack was definitely not a skill nor buffed by divine magic. So if you asked me whether that attack was the best I could do or not, it definitely isn't. Having said that, I seriously put effort into that attack. Although that attack was not backed up by a buff or a skill, I had seriously kicked her without holding back. This was the same situation as the fight against the Demon King. Although I was fighting with all my might, from the opponent's point of view, they thought I was holding back. In other words, it signified that I was not at the point where Ruppes was 200 years ago, and if Bennett Nash was able to fight against the Ruppes from 200 years ago on equal footing, I was in a very bad position in this battle. Looks like I really don't have the leeway to be holding back, huh? I cast a status increase buff on myself and as if to match that, Bennett Nash also activated a skill to increase her own status. Next round. I'll see how long you can keep holding back. I really don't have the intention of doing that, you know. Bennett Nash flew towards me again, this time much quicker than before. Fast. Even for me, I was only able to see the shadow of her movement and barely registered that she had charged towards me. I quickly tried to guard the attack in response and when I did, I felt a heavy impact run through my arms from the other side. Although I tried to counterattack her, Bennett Nash had already disappeared from my sight. When I thought that a silver ray ran past me, this time, I felt the impact from behind me. I was somehow able to guard against this attack using my wings, however. This is not good. I can't keep up with her movement? From then on, it was clearly a defensive battle for me. As the silver ray of light moved about and continuously salted me from all directions, I could do nothing but barely guard against them. Even if I felt like counterattacking, there was nothing that I could do because I was not able to keep her in my sight. Because I was able to barely keep track of her afterimage, I was somehow able to defend against her attacks in time. However, I probably would not be able to win the fight by just defending. As such, there was only one option that I could take. I predicted the upcoming attack, forewent the defense and threw my fist at Bennett Nash's face, aiming to get an eye for an eye. As predicted, she stepped in at the same time to claw at my cheek, however, in a test of power, I was above her. Notwithstanding that I was able to get away after taking a small amount of damage, Bennett Nash went flying away quite easily and her beautiful face was drenched in blood. However, Bennett Nash laughed in pure delight and came flying back in towards me as the wounds on her face quickly regenerated. Oi! Normally, people would be a bit more hesitant. Even though I had managed to counter her, she did not pay attention to it at all and continued with her onslaught. As I was getting cornered by her, I remembered the fight between the two magical beasts which I had just witnessed. That magical beast that looked like a weasel, if I recall correctly, it was called a Bavarine or something. 3. That guy didn't mind its inferior status and fought against the bigger hippo without fear. And in the end, it ended up winning. There was nothing scarier than those who did not fear anything. The ones without hesitation were extremely troublesome because they did not care about what happened to themselves. After all, we often hear the idiom, the more cowardly you are, the longer you live. I had absolutely no intention of rejecting that notion, and if anything, it was probably how things really were. Although the words brave and courageous sounded great, it could be taken to mean that those individuals merely unshackled themselves from their natural self-preserving limiters. Therefore, it was only natural that they usually did not live for long. However, when it came to a one-off battle, there was nothing scarier than individuals who did not fear anything. And in all likelihood, Bennett Nash was one such individual. Without a shred of doubt, she had entrusted her everything for this one single fight. The line, "I have waited 200 years for this," was by no means an exaggeration. She truly believed that it would be fine to die right here and now. Therefore, regardless of whether she was to end up receiving an injury that would last with her for the rest of her life or end up dying, she could not care less. Until she died herself or I was killed, she would continue with the battle. She was standing in this place with such a mindset. This person, without even needing to debate about it, is definitely the most troublesome enemy up to this date. Transaction M.U.Te, Winter of Swords. I trans.M.U.Ted a single sword and stabbed it into the ground. At the same time, countless blades grew out from the ground and created a field of no escape which all simultaneously salted Bennett Nash. Needless to say, I did not think for a moment that something like this would be enough to defeat Bennett Nash. However, it would at least serve the purpose of allowing me to read her next movement. If she were to avoid the blades, her speed would naturally decrease, and if she were to break them, the location of the broken blades would serve to tell me where she was. However, neither of those scenarios came to fruition and there was no figure of Bennett Nash within the mountain of blades. In that case, there was only one possibility. Without even looking, I leapt into the air and body slammed right into Bennett Nash, who was attacking me violently from above. As there was a swarm of blades on the ground, it was very difficult to attack me. As such, the simplest way to attack me was from above, which also happened to be the safest place at the moment. Ha! I grabbed onto Bennett Nash's arm and shot a kick right into her soft stomach. At the same time, I elbowed down on her back and pincered her between my elbow and knee. Blood spewed out from Bennett Nash's mouth, and even whilst I was feeling a little sorry for her, we flew up into the sky. After breaking past the ceiling, I continued to ascend straight up, eventually reaching a point where Mjolnir's buildings barely looked like small peas before rapidly descending back down. Adding to the fall speed, I threw her towards an area of ground away from the capital with all my might and activated a follow-up skill. Transaction M.U.Te, Hrungnir's right arm. 4 From the ground came rising up particles of sand and rocks, eventually reaching past even the clouds. Then, with the downwards motion of my arm, an enormous fist fell down after splitting the clouds. It was an enormous fist weighing 10 tons given birth by the alchemist's skill. And that skill slammed right into Bennett Nash without any mercy. With an ear-shattering sound, the ground caved right in. After finest.h.I plus ng my attack, I inspected the enormous fist that I had created myself. So how's that? Is it over with that attack? Or did I go too far? It'll be for the best if she just stays knocked down though. Nevertheless, my expectations were quickly shattered as a crack started to run through the enormous arm. There was not even a need to mention who the one cracking it was. Eventually, after it was completely broken, the silver-haired vampire princess came flying out from within, then stopped when she came in front of me. Looks like there's some effect, but her smile bri.m.m.i.n.g with leisure is still there, huh? Just as I was expecting. It was quite a decent attack, but considering you, that was quite a soft attack. Are you unable to get serious with me as the opponent? Or is it that? Bennett Nash's eyes shone suspiciously as she laughed after showing her fangs. This is not good, I'm having a bad feeling about this. You will feel like actually trying once I get serious first. Yeah, there it is, she said it. That CLA.S.sick cliché, the I actually wasn't trying at all line. Honestly, I knew something like this was gonna happen, damn it. Author note, raising the curtains for the Ruppas vs Bennett battle by the way, between when Bennett first dashed in and I guess I should say it's to be expected scene, not even a single second of time lapsed. Of course, if an ordinary person were to have observed this fight from the side, it would have just looked like the two of them disappeared and places here and there shattered and exploded randomly. During the time the Rock was falling back onto the ground, there was kick dodge drop kick and then magic dodge chop finger thrust knee kick backhanded slap ground kick high kick tens of attacks exchanged psycho compression restriction negated attack with a claw leap into the air to avoid the attack and land at the back high kick Bennett got blown away and stopped, are all the exchanges that took place. Q. I don't quite understand what you mean by how things can be so quick that it feels like time has stopped. A. Please imagine Zeldincht who's able to repeatedly use rush punch and head shock within the span of 1 second in the game, but is actually many tens of minutes of endlessly punching the enemy from the perspective of the player. 5. Ruppas and Bennett are individuals that are able to live in that domain of the perception of time. Chapter 99. The feeling of intimidating pressure that I felt from Bennett Nash continued to be amplified. Before I knew it, I was covered in cold sweat and was able to understand that even I was being overwhelmed by her aura. Things were getting so ridiculous that it was no longer even funny anymore. To think that I, who was usually in the position to use the coercion racial skill, would be the one to be swallowed and oppressed under the pressure this time. Bennett Nash's silver hair fluttered about as lightning and thunder split the sky. As if to answer what was happening, the sky, which had been enveloped in darkness, cleared to allow the moonlight to S.H.I+N.E upon the whole of Mjolnir. Ordinarily, Mjolnir was enveloped by Bennett Nash's arcane magic to prevent the sunlight from ever entering. However, because she had finally decided to get serious, the spell must have been undone. In other words, the long-standing mana that she had been expanding on the spell the whole time had returned to her. And worse yet, tonight was the night of the full moon. In other words, on top of the strength that Bennett Nash had previously displayed, she was now further strengthened by the mana that she had just recovered and the power of the moon. Back in the game, the concept of getting strengthened during the night of the full moon was nothing but a background setting. To begin with, such a thing as the night of the full moon did not exist back in the game. Within the game, however long a player was to wait, the moon would always be a crescent moon, showing the laziness of the developers. However, in this world, what was merely a background setting turned into a reality. The surge of magical power emanated by Bennett Nash amplified to the extent where one could see it undulate with their naked eyes. Furthermore, it did not stop there. Muffle. I'm really grateful to you. If I didn't meet you, I wouldn't have been able to reach this point. So, this is the greatest form of respect that I can submit to you. No, it's enough, I'm really satisfied already. Please, just forgive me already. However, as expected, such a weak-hearted thing would never have come out of my mouth. After coming to this point, I was finally truly hateful of how this body prevented me from being able to say such a convenient thing. Oi, at least let me whine. Even if you don't feel like getting serious, it's fine. It just means that I'm at the point where I fail to make you feel that way. Then, in that case, I'll let you see how far I've gotten first this world beyond level 1000 that you taught me in the past. After saying that, a silver light enveloped Bennett Nash. No, wait. Seriously, wait a minute. I thought level 1000 was the upper limit in this world? At the very least, from the knowledge that I possessed, level 1000 was as high as a character could reach. Beyond that, a character's stats could only be raised by doping items. However, I was sure that was not what Bennett Nash was referring to. The magic power of Bennett Nash continued to increase even more despite the fact that I already thought I was in a position to no longer be able to handle her. In the process, her silver hair became white gold, platinum, colored and her whole body started to S.H.I+N.E with a silver hue. Oh, this is bad. I can't see her status, but I can feel it in my skin. This girl's seriously no good. Even though she didn't receive the divine protection of the G.O.Dis, she just powered up even more than what's possible through the G.O.Dis's divine protection. What is with this monster? Now, here I come. After saying that, Bennett Nash vanished. At exactly the same time Bennett Nash vanished, I felt an impact as if I was getting punched by something and I saw the background fly past me. It hurt because I was punched. I understood what was happening as such. Although I quickly stopped myself mid-air and safely landed back down on the ground, I was unable to find Bennett Nash's figure whatsoever. My perception of time was already dilated to the extreme. Without a shred of mistake, everything around me was still. However, I was unable to find her. I was not even able to see the shadow of her afterimage. Was it implying that even though I was able to see everything around me still and stranded in time, Bennett Nash was able to see my figure as still and frozen in time? Ha! This time, it was my stomach. Again, I felt an impact run through me. I felt the sense of pain as if I was getting impaled by something. Nevertheless, I was still unable to find the figure of Bennett Nash who had attacked me. On the other hand, I could only blindly prepare myself for the upcoming attack like a clueless fool. How could this be? Ever since I had gotten into this body, whatever was said, I had somehow managed to continue winning against everything quite leisurely. There were times where I had to put some effort in, but even then, I did not experience any major difficulty to the point that I would call it problematic. Notwithstanding that, I had completely lost track of my enemy's figure. Currently, I was no different from a scarecrow. I was unable to keep up with her speed and she alone existed in a higher dimension after S.H.I plus fting her speed gear up. Let's aim to land an eye for an eye counter. Even such an aim could not be done. At the moment, we had already gotten to the point where I could not even figure out where and how she was going to come attacking. Nevertheless, I could not continue to let her do whatever she wanted to me. Firstly, I would determine her movement. Transaction M.U.Te, Winter of Swords. I grew countless swords from the ground and restricted Bennett Nash's movement. Now, without this, tisk. I was made to understand how shallow and short-sighted my thoughts were and how the gaps between the two of us had long said the point of making such small tricks meaningless. Of all things that could have happened, every single blade which I had just created on the ground immediately shattered at the same time and before I could guard myself, Bennett Nash's punch sent me flying. During this state and before I could even reposture myself or get time to breathe, I received an attack to my stomach, next to my back, then to my chin and my ribs. Many other continuous barrages of attacks descended all over my body. This is really bad, she's way beyond a joke. She's way too strong and way too fast. Right now, I can't even figure out or understand if I'm getting punched, kicked, or getting shot by magic. All that I can understand is that I've turned into a sandbag to be one-sidedly salted. However you want to word it, this is what you call foul play. To begin with, what the H.E.L.L is she talking about? What is this world beyond level 1000 anyways? Don't even know anything about that, you know? In any case, she's actually really strong. Hey look, got punched again. This time it was my shoulder. Oh, I know I just got slammed into the ground and got shot by magic on my back. I've heard that she was strong, but honestly, if it's to this degree, I'm quite stuck. Didn't think that you would actually have grown up to be strong to this degree. After all, from the first time I met you, you were already in a different league compared to the others. So the result of you aiming to reach higher as a result of meeting me is this, huh? Haha, how joyful. Wait, what do I, mean by the first time I met you? This thought process isn't me, but Rupa's, right? Oh, this is not good, I'm getting punched so much I'm losing consciousness. I even know myself that my memory and consciousness are getting muddled and disoriented. But strangely, I'm not feeling irritated or frustrated at all. If anything, deep down, I'm feeling honored and delighted, inside of me. You've done well to have gotten this strong. To have polished yourself up to this point, you have done a good job. Really, you're amazing. Honestly, you really make me want to bow to you. To be able to have reached this strength, an ordinary amount of effort wasn't enough, was it? Therefore, before I, knew it, I, was laughing. The outcome of events was so joyful that I, could not help but be pleased. Ah, really, I'm, really delighted, Bennett. You have done well for yourself to have claimed up to this point. The atmosphere released by Ruppes changed. After Bennett Nash promptly detected that change, she stopped attacking and quickly backed away to create some distance. Until this point, notwithstanding that she was the one attacking one-sidedly, she did not think for a single moment that she was in an advantageous position. It was because she knew. She knew that Ruppes Muffle was nothing insignificant like that when she was serious. The arch-rival that she had feared, adored, chased after and wished for simply could not have been a weakling like that. Therefore, she was convinced that there would definitely be a time when Ruppes arrived, and in fact, Ruppes had finally decided to show her real ability. So it's finally arrived. Indeed. Ruppes stood up whilst adorning a relaxed smile and took a glance at Bennett Nash before turning to survey the surroundings. While Ruppes was looking around, she was giving off that nostalgic feeling, thus Bennett Nash felt a sense of strange confusion. However, she quickly switched her thought process. The only thing important right now was what was happening right here and now. The fact that Ruppes had finally decided to get serious, as long as such a reality existed, it was enough for Bennett Nash. As I was expecting, it was you, huh? The one to smack me awake. What? Haha, it's nothing important. I was just daydreaming a little. Until now, I was stuck in a dreamlike state, you see. Well, all things considered, it ended up turning out the way I predicted it would turn out. Ruppes took a step forward. Matching that, Bennett Nash unconsciously took a step backward, allowing her to recognize that she was instinctually fearful of Ruppes. That's right, this is that Ruppes Muffle. The arch-rival that I respected and feared. There's no way Ruppes Muffle can be anything else. Bennett Nash bolstered herself mentally and took a step forward as if to cover for the instinctive step that she took, which seemed like a step to run away. Thanks to you, I've woken up. The way you woke me up was a little extreme, but it was just the perfect amount for me who was daydreaming. I believed that if it was you, you would smack my head to help me wake up. It was worth coming here, after all. Ruppes smiled Ruffles.H.I plus NGLY and joyfully as she spread her black wings wide. Ares and Scorpius wouldn't have been able to do this. They're competent, but they could easily have been managed by the sleeping me when I turned around in my sleep. Looks like I really must thank you, Bennett. Both of Ruppes's hands were coated with mana. The concentration of divine power and arcane power increased as they interacted with each other and they circulated around Ruppes. There was no mistaking it. The current Ruppes was completely in the mood to smash things out. The once supreme ruler who had ruled the entire world, the black-winged overlord, has once again graced me with her presence. In response to that gracious feeling, Bennett Nash's mouth distorted and she once again moved at a speed which could be mistaken for the speed of light. Sway. After releasing a warcry, she challenged Ruppes with her greatest speed and might. It was different from how she had been probing things out like she previously was. It was, without a doubt, the greatest amount of might that she had and a truly serious attack. If it was an ordinary person, let alone understanding what was happening, they would have ceased to exist without even being able to figure out that they were attacked. The speed was almost no different from the speed of light. The attack that she used had once split the continent, along with the magical beasts and demons living on it, into two. The vampire princess's wholehearted attack caused a permanent fissure on the planet, yet, Ruppes stopped it with just a single fingertip. Ruppes's hair fluttered and just from the shockwave of the attack, fissures ran along the ground behind her. However, the fingertip which had directly stopped the impact of the attack did not even have a single scratch on it, nor was a single layer of skin torn. After an instant of stiffness, Bennett Nash had already moved on to her second attack. I knew it already. I predicted and foresaw it already. That's right, my opponent's that Ruppes Muffle. The strongest individual in existence and the only individual whom I determined to be worthy of trying to Serpa.s. So it's only natural that she can do something like this. It's only natural that her ability is this high. A wall so high that I can't see the end, a wall that looks impossible to climb over. But it's because it's this high that it's worth climbing over. It's because it's this high that it's worth challenging. Stronger, faster, sharper. Bennett Nash attacked furiously like a blizzard with her magic-imbued claws. However, Rupaz was able to stop every one of those slashes and did not suffer a single injury. Against that Bennett Nash, Rupaz smiled gently, then placed her hand onto her forehead, a finger flick. As Bennett Nash felt that her head was about to burst open, she was blown away. She then barely managed to spin around a few times in midair and land back down safely. What power! Even when it's a full moon. Bennett Nash wiped away the blood that was flowing out from her forehead while her mouth distorted to form a smile as if she was possessed. I've waited too long, yeah, I've waited an eternity for this. This is a wall worth overcoming. This is worth challenging. I'm not winning in a fight that I know that I am going to end up winning. I'm in a fight where I don't even know if I'm going to win. No, I'm challenging an enemy that I almost know for certain that I have no chance of winning against. This is what it means to battle. This is what the word challenge means. Right now, I can feel it in my skin that I'm the challenger without a doubt. Yeah, I feel a little mortified. But above all that, I feel happy. The one that I'm aiming to Serpa.s is definitely an outrageous person. That fact makes me feel blissful. As expected. You won't lose the will to fight, huh? Of course. If I was going to lose my will to fight from just that, I wouldn't challenge you in the first place. Rupaz, who felt joy in Bennett Nash's undying will for their battle, glanced over her own status once. Rupaz Mafal level 3000 species, Flugel CLA.S. level warrior 200 sword master 200 grappler 200 champion 200 monster tamer 200 alchemist 200 ranger 200 strider 200 acolyte 200 priest 200 esper 200 psychic 200 mage 200 sorcerer 200 the archenemy 200 HP 18050000 SP 72 290 STR strength/attack power 46 600 dex Dexterity 29 250 VIT, Vitality 4900 int, Intelligence 34 900 AGI, Agility/Speed 42 334 MND, Mind Power 34 650 Luck, Luck 27 840 Equipment 1 Head, ____ right arm, ____ left arm, ____ body, Dress of Heaven's Empress immunity from all status debuffs auto HP regeneration foot, boots of swiftness increased movement speed in battle others, overcoat of the 7 luminaries 50% damage reduction from all elemental attacks. 80%. No, about 70% of the original, huh? After Rupaz checked her own stats, she was able to recognize that she had yet to fully recover. Nevertheless, she judged that it would not be a problem to fight against Bennett Nash. Fundamentally in this world, level 1000 was the upper limit that an individual could reach. That was the highest possible limit set by the laws laid down by the G.O.dis. As long as one followed her rules, it was impossible to go beyond that point. However, Rupaz had Serpa.s. said that limit. In other words, it signified that she had broken through the rules of this world created by the G.O.dis herself. Additionally, this was not a phenomenon limited to just Rupaz. Bennett Nash also stood in a similar domain. This reality was what made Rupaz joyful. The Vampire Princess Bennett Nash level 1500 species, Vampire CLA.S. level Grappler 200 Champion 200 A.S.S. Sin 200 Strider 400 Mage 200 Sorcerer 200 Necromancer 100 HP, 705,000 SP. 31,430 STR, Strength/Attack Power 26 112 Dex, Dexterity 10 787 VIT, Vitality 14 305 int, Intelligence 14 318 AGI, Agility/Speed 42001 MND, Mind Power 11 295 Luck, Luck 10 282 Equipment 2 Head, Tiara of the Moon Auto HP Regeneration Right Arm, Usurper's Claw absorbs enemy HP upon attacking left arm, Usurper's Claw absorbs enemy HP upon attacking body, Vestment of Immortality Auto HP Regeneration Foot, Boots of Black Shadow Evasion Chance increased by 100%. Others, Overcoat of Moonlit Night Auto HP Regeneration increased by 100% during nighttime. Vampire exclusive item. Just by looking at Bennett Nash's status, Ruppaz was easily able to understand that Bennett Nash was not ridiculing her with the intention to challenge her. Although Bennett Nash's status did not reach as high as Ruppaz's, she was able to leave the restrictive boundary specified by the G.O.Dis. Notwithstanding that Bennett Nash was enjoying the boost from the full moon night, her combat prowess was nothing short of splendid. It was no wonder the demon race was unable to pass her. How would the bunch of existences who were bound to live within the realm specified by the G.O.Dis be able to pierce past Bennett Nash, who had Serpa.S. said that she was now a qualified individual. She had already taken possession of the right to challenge the G.O.Dis into her own hands. Notwithstanding that, if Ruppaz was to be asked whether Bennett Nash could already defeat her, the answer would be no. Furthermore, Ruppaz had no intention to let Bennett Nash win either. However, to just win simply against that Bennett Nash, who had waited 200 years for this moment, would be unfair to her. Therefore, there was only one thing that Ruppaz could do. To use all of her might to the very limit, without holding back, without mercy, and to utterly annihilate Bennett Nash with the best of her ability. That was the greatest show of respect and the greatest form of courtesy. Be honored, Bennett. You're an opponent that is worthy of me giving my best. So in respect to you, I will also be fighting using a weapon that's worthy to be used against you. Ruppaz muttered an honest compliment without any lie and held her hand up. And the power formed in her hand was of both divine and arcane nature. She caused the two types to clash with one another, distorting this world to create a hole in the S.P.A.ce which was created by the G.O.Dis. The hole in the S.P.A.ce then turned into a gate and connected to create a temporary pathway to another location, effectively turning the distance between the two locations into zero. X-Gate, come, my weapon. The Supreme Ruler's summoning. In accordance with that command, the Mawful Tower, which stood in the far distant land, started to rumble. Chapter 100. The countless number of equipment retrieved from the royal tomb of the Black Wings had been sent to the Mawful Tower and were ordinarily only usable via Dina, who was able to utilize X-Gate to bring those equipment to Ruppaz's hand. At the very least, that was what Ruppaz had believed until this moment, and as a matter of fact, that was truly how things were. However, that preconception was overturned by none other than Ruppaz herself. It was because the equipment in the tower were summoned to her hand without going through Dina due to the X-Gate which was activated by herself. The equipment which was called over was a set of two swords which acted as one weapon. One sword screamed of power but looked unrefined, while the shorter sword gave off a feeling of grace and looked elegant. Although the pairing looked mismatched with each other, it gave off the feeling of man and woman. Lithrasir. 2. This is a legendary sword that was said would remain intact even if the world were to end. It's a treasure that'll be wasted if I were to use it against some random small fry, but if it's against you, even this sword would probably be happy to lend me its aid. Nothing will come out of it even if you praise me, you know. It's my honest compliment. You should accept it gracefully. Ruppaz swung the swords around even though it was not the appropriate time to be doing so. Needless to say, Bennett Nash was not a clueless idiot to be thinking, what is she doing, whilst she saw this? In a battle like the one they were in, the concept of common sense was useless. If anything, it could even be said that the winner was determined by how and to what extent an individual could Serpa.S this so-called common sense. Right after Bennett Nash flew into the air, the ground which used to be below her shattered and the slash attack continued to fly into S.P.A.ce beyond Midgard, eventually splitting a faraway asteroid into two. 3. However, the two had no way of knowing the collateral damage that happened elsewhere far away in outer S.P.A.ce. They both kicked the ground to take a step forward and clashed in the middle, causing a gale to blow away from them due to the impact. Bennett Nash's claws and Rapaz's short swords smashed against each other, and very quickly, Bennett Nash, who had lost in the contest of strength, was blown away. Nevertheless, she quickly got back on her feet and struck her palm out. Luna Shooter. Soul Bullet. The black torrent released from Bennett Nash's palm and the Ma.S of white light shot from Rapaz's finger clashed with each other. In terms of power, both of them were approximately the same. However, Luna Shooter, the arcane magic activated by Bennett Nash, was a high-tier moon attribute arcane magic and was one of the ultimate skills which was used to instantly kill an enemy using a Ma.S sieve amount of mana. On the other hand, Soul Bullet, used by Rapaz, was a fundamental basic offensive arcane magic of the Sun attribute. It was of a lower tier than the one Bennett Nash had used. The fact that the two of them were equal with one another signified the difference in the ability to handle arcane magic between the two of them. Furthermore, that clash did not last for a long time. It was because Rapaz came DOS.H.I+NG through her own attack towards Bennett Nash. Looking at this, Bennett Nash clicked her tongue whilst thinking, what a troublesome sword. A part of Rapaz's collection, a pair of swords, Lithrasir. The longer magical sword Lif was able to slice through divine magic and therefore made it possible to attack the enemy directly whilst penetrating past their defensive barriers. The shorter divine sword Thrasir was able to cut through arcane magic and therefore effectively served as a powerful defensive anti-arcane magic weapon. Although, against Bennett Nash, who would not use divine magic, the longer blade Lif was completely ineffective, making it nothing more than a sword that cut well. Thus it served as a silver lining in all of this. However, if a question of whether it made everything well was to be asked, the answer would be no. After all, the one who was holding onto that sword was the strongest user in all of Midgard, Rapaz. When in her hands, even an ordinary knife would turn into a weapon which would be worthy to be called legendary. And in this case, that individual took hold of a weapon which was already CLA.S.cified as legendary. As a consequence, the might and threat of that weapon did not need further mention. Hey! After screaming out a war cry, Bennett Nash turned into a silver ray of light. Overcoming even her own limits and ignoring the creaks from her joints, she continued to attack Rapaz from all directions. However, with a cool expression that aggravated Bennett Nash, Rapaz deflected the attacks with her sword and did not end up suffering even a single scratch. Let alone that, from just a casual swing of the sword, Bennett Nash's right arm was amputated from her shoulder. Tisk. Bennett Nash immediately picked up the severed arm and held it towards the open wound, forcibly regenerating everything. Afterwards, without the slightest bit of hesitation, she charged in from the front and using the remaining blood on her hands from the previously amputated arm, attempted to blind her enemy. She then circled around to the back and thrust her arm straight towards where Rapaz's heart would have been. But again, it did not hit. Whilst keeping her back where it was and only moving her arm, Rapaz blocked Bennett Nash's attack with the blade of her sword. Afterwards, Rapaz spun around and utilized the inertia to reinforce her kick on Bennett Nash's chest to launch her up. The sound of Bennett Nash's ribs cracking resounded and from her mouth spewed blood. Yet, she did not falter. After landing back on the ground as if barely managing to avoid being uncontrollably slammed down, she held her palm out in front of her and released a barrage of arcane magic to rain down upon her enemy. Individually, her condensed mana bullets were dense enough to each destroy a city on its own. Yet she released hundreds to thousands of them whilst leaving no S.P.A.ce for any maneuvers. However, even after such an attack, Rapaz was still unscathed. Flying out of the cloud of dust and cutting past the mana bullets, she ended up in front of Bennett Nash. Then, without the slightest bit of hesitation, she slashed. Bennett Nash's upper and lower body were sliced off from each other. Tisk, don't look down on me. However, in that very situation, Bennett Nash countered, directly landing a mana bullet on Rapaz. Additionally, it might be appropriate to call it an obsession born as a result of her long-standing strong feelings. Notwithstanding that the lower body was separated from the brain, the lower body moved on its own and kicked Rapaz away. In light of what had just happened, even Rapaz was astonished, causing her to open her eyes wide in surprise as she was blown away. Taking advantage of this interruption, Bennett Nash combined the bisected upper and lower body together. Unfortunately, perhaps due to how much severe damage she had suffered up to this point, she ended up kneeling down for a moment. Just from this, won't fall from just this much. Who cares about the pain, who cares about the damage? I've already determined that this battle's going to continue until one of us dies. This is exactly the once-in-a-lifetime battle that I've long sought after. So, I can't be wasting my time on my knees. There's no room to stop and recover. As if I'll be done with just this. Bennett Nash did not even wait for her wounds to recover properly before charging in and starting her fierce attack again. Her attacks were by no means slow. They were neither weak nor dull. If anything, there was no one else in Midgard who could dish out attacks which were equally fast, equally strong and equally sharp. Each of her individual attacks in this countless barrage was more than enough to instantly kill those at the level of the 7 luminaries and deal major damage to those at the same standing as the 12 stars. She was, without a doubt, the absolute strongest existence amongst the 7 heroes and one of the individuals who could be called the strongest in Midgard alongside the Demon King. However, even against an attack from such an individual, Ruppes was able to easily overcome it and counter-attack, slamming her feet down and breaking Bennett Nash's neck. Even whilst rolling on the ground, the regeneration effect took place. However, notwithstanding that Bennett Nash stood back up, she was already out of breath and it was clear that she was heavily drained from everything that had happened thus far. S.H.I+T, I knew it already, but she's so far. I knew that I wouldn't be able to win, but is she telling me I can't even contend with her properly? She was happy that her arch-rival was strong. However, that aside, if she was unable to do something about the difference, it was already clear who the loser would be. She had issued a challenge whilst fully prepared to lose in the end, but it was not as if she wanted to lose. After all, her greatest wish was to defeat Ruppes and Serpa.S. her. Therefore, she wired her brain to think of a move that would lead her to victory. She had absolutely no intention of saying foul plays were unfair or cowardly, this late in the game. Winning was everything. Attacks aiming for the eyes, feint attacks, and surprise attacks, as long as there was a hand to play, she did not care what it was. She no longer paid any attention to what method she would have to use to win, nor was she fighting against an enemy that she would be able to win against if she was worried about such a thing. It was fine to look unsightly, it was fine to look dirty, and it was fine to look desperate. If it meant that she would be able to win against her opponent. There was no A.S. set worth more than that. Boom, the heart rang loudly. The voice of a person whom she did not know, but certainly recognized, resounded. And suddenly, something was flowing into Bennett Nash. That was power. It was exactly what she was Wisconsin H.I+NG for just a moment ago. The move that would close the gap between herself and Ruppes. Just for a moment, Bennett Nash saw a vision of a blue-haired beautiful lady in a dress. A woman, who gave off a strangely tranquil feeling, smiled warmly, and Bennett Nash saw a scene of herself getting hugged by that lady. At the same time, Bennett Nash suddenly overflowed with divine power all throughout her body. Power filled her entire being. Is this it? So this is the secret behind how the 7 heroes won against Ruppes. She had always thought that everything was strange. She had always thought it was a mystery that even though there was such a ma.s.civ difference between Ruppes and the 7 heroes, the 7 heroes were able to come out victorious. But finally, she understood. If it was like this, it was understandably no longer impossible to end up victorious. All the more, if it was her which gained such a power, it would enable her to fight against Ruppes on almost equal footing. With this, if I have this power, I'll be able to battle against her. As a consequence, Bennett Nash laughed at the situation and then opened her mouth. You're in the way. Scram. Bennett Nash could feel that the owner of the voice was surprised by her response. However, she did not know why she was surprised to that extent, nor did she care to want to understand why. This fight was hers. The battle that she had long continued to seek. And at the end of that battle, whether it be a victory or defeat, whether it be life or death, everything was hers alone. As if I'll even give a single millimeter of it away. What kind of a misunderstanding is this stupid woman under? Did she think for a moment that I would be happy with this? Did she think that everyone would get on their knees to pray, wars.h.I+p and say, ah, thank you very much, g.o.dis like fools or something? Know your place. There's a limit to how impudent you can be. I've never once called for an idiot like you, nor have I ever had the need to. When did I ever say I needed your support? Since when have I ever wished for help from an insignificant idiot like you? That affectionate g.o.dis mask of yours and your hands that try to bless me are disgusting and make me want to puke. Don't you dare try to touch me, trash. The only one in this place that's permitted to come in contact with me is her alone. Didn't you hear me? I've said to Scram already, Allo Venus, you third-rate author. 4 Bennett Nash shouted out loud, and silvery light overflowed from her body. At the same time, the power, which was seeping from her body, was extinguished and the divine power itself was blown away from her. I don't need it. I have no need for a fake power like that. Sure, I want to win against Ruppaz even if I have to exchange my life for it, but if I have to win using a borrowed power like that, even dying would be better. In the first place, winning like that is not your own victory. Even if a person were to win like that, it would merely mean that an individual that received the g.o.dis's power won, and it would not be the individual's victory alone. I thought to win regardless of what kind of dirty tactics I had to use. I wished to Serpa.s her even if I had to look unsightly. But I've never wished to fall to the point of becoming someone else's tool nor win using someone else's power. That's right, this battle is my fight. This stage is for just Ruppaz and myself. As if I'll let someone else come onto the stage. Even if that person is the g.o.dis, I'll kick her down and make her fall back onto the audience seat. The only thing a fool like you can do is observe. Just shut up and watch from the side, you out-of-place g.o.dis. I've made you wait, now, let's continue our fight. I won't let anyone else interfere. What are you looking like a fool for, Moffle? No, nothing. I was just thinking, you're quite an existence. I've never once felt this much respect from the bottom of my heart like I do now, Bennett. After hearing Ruppaz's honest compliment, Bennett Nash's eyes opened wide, then she started to laugh. What are you saying this late in time? I've always been quite an existence. If I wasn't, I would never have been able to call myself your arch-rival. Haha, that's right. You're certainly someone worthy of calling yourself my arch-rival. Just then, I felt that feeling being renewed once again. The two of them acknowledged each other and smiled at one another, creating a moment of stillness. But regardless of whatever happened, this was still a battlefield and they were still in the middle of killing each other. Therefore, the tranquility did not continue to last. Although Bennett Nash was drained, she moved resolutely towards Ruppaz with a movement as sharp and as fast as she had been moving until now. Due to her own extreme speed, even her own body suffered as a consequence, causing blood to flow down from the corner of her mouth as she continued to strike at Ruppaz. In response, Ruppaz used pinpoint precision to guard, deflect, and counter Bennett Nash to send her flying. Then the follow-up attack. Ruppaz slammed her feet into Bennett Nash, who had barely managed to get her feet back on the ground, shattering her ribs into pieces and shoving them into her organs, attempting to break her delicate body. Yet even then, the vampire princess continued to remain standing without falling down. Not yet. I won't lose, yet. Bennett Nash jumped up, gathering and amplifying all of her magical power in her two hands. In perception of the incoming imminent doom, the whole of Midgard shook violently. Animals across the world trembled in panic, and the Sword Saint, who was traveling together with SEI's group, became terrified and unable to move. Perhaps it was what you call an instinct possessed by those in the wild. They could subconsciously sense what was going to happen. Right now, in this time and S.P.A.C. A power that was more than enough to obliterate the entirety of Midgard was created. And on top of all of that, that power was within the hands of the woman who would fire it towards Midgard without the slightest bit of hesitation. They understood all of that instinctively. Along with Midgard, everything can perish. From the hands of Bennett Nash, a light gushed out, piercing into open S.P.A.C. Right afterwards, what peeked out from the sky was a single arrow. However, the size of that arrow was something stupendous. If it was the length alone, it was well over a few kilometers. All things considered, rather than an arrow, it might have been better suited to being called a spear. No, even if it was a spear, it was far too long. In any event, it was far too strong of a power to be called an arrow fired from a bow. The maiden who fires the silver arrow. 5. Bennett Nash swung her arms down. At the same time, the greatest highest-tiered moon attribute arcane magic, enhanced with as much power as possible, came charging towards the ground. What would happen to Midgard as a result of this attack was nothing but a throwaway thought to Bennett Nash. Even if the whole world was to be destroyed, as long as she would be able to win against Ruppaz, even just for the slightest moment, it was all fine for her. She did not care that she would die as a result. Nevertheless, in the face of an attack which could literally destroy the whole world, Ruppaz laughed without a care and then firmly settled down on the ground. Then, along with an ear-shattering sound, the silver arrow came dropping onto where Ruppaz was currently standing.